When autumn rolls around, we find ourselves surrounded by pumpkins and skeletons and scary things. Our modern Halloween has some fascinating roots deep in ancient sacred practices. To learn more and to discover how this time of year can really enrich your own spiritual practice, just boop that like button and let's dive in. Hiya lovely, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Shirley from Sacred Huntress, helping you to create the life you deserve through healing, self-care and spiritual purpose. Now, the festival we're going to be exploring today is often mispronounced. So I thought I'd clarify before we start that the ancient Celts pronounced it Samhain. Say it with me now, Samhain. Now, I like personally for my spiritual practices to be rooted in context wherever possible. So in this video, we're going to be going over 3 sections. Now, all 3 chapters are interrelated, so you'll get the most out of this video if you actually watch all 3. But if you are pushed for time, if you want to skip ahead, then you can actually find the timestamps in the description box below. So in the first chapter, we're going to be exploring the origins of Samhain, so the ancient Celtic belief systems and practices that gave rise to our modern Halloween. The second chapter will explore the spiritual themes. Now, that will help you to understand the general theme of the season. And finally, we're going to be exploring how to celebrate, and that is practical things that you can do on Samhain to enrich your own spiritual practice. Samhain was celebrated by the ancient Celts from October 31st to the 1st of November, and it marked the midpoint between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And if you do want to know more about the Wheel of the Year, then consider subscribing, because I'll be explaining that in much more detail in an upcoming video. Samhain was a time of celebration to celebrate the last of the harvests being gathered in and all the work for the year being done. So people would finish their work and go and gather with the Druid priests and build the most incredible communal bonfires, and the whole community would celebrate around the bonfire. And it's interesting to note in Britain especially how close to bonfire night Samhain actually falls. Now, if you're wondering where Halloween costumes might have originated from, Samhain was a time where the veil between the worlds was at its thinnest, and it was believed that fairies and goblins and the spirits of the dead could pass through into our ordinary world. And so people would dress up on Samhain to prevent themselves from being kidnapped by the fairy folk. So they dress up as monsters and animals to scare the fairies and the spirits away. As Samhain was the time where the veil was at its thinnest, it was the time for the ancient Celts to honour the spirits of the dead and to honour their ancestors as well. And groups of people, if you're wondering where trick or treating originated from, groups of people would dress up to stop themselves from being kidnapped by fairies and mischievous folk. And they would move from house to house to house, and they would sing songs to the dead, and they were given cakes and sweet things in return in a practice known as mumming. And it's really creepy. If you Google it, it's so creepy, it's untrue. The ancient Celts believed that goblins and fairies and lost souls and the spirits of the dead were wandering about on this particular night. And so they would carve turnips, they would carve scary faces into turnips and put candles outside and put those outside the house to prevent any kind of mischievous souls from entering the household. And later on, those turnips turned into pumpkins. The Irish started using pumpkins instead of the old jack-o'-lanterns. And that's where the modern Halloween tradition of carving pumpkins actually comes from. The ancient Celts also put candles in the window to help lost souls to pass into spirit and to help them to find their way into the spirit world. In terms of spiritual themes, there are two main themes to Samhain, and the first one is darkness. It's a time of year where the light is fading, waiting to be reborn at the winter solstice. The days are becoming shorter, and so it's a time to look within and explore the shadow within ourselves especially. It's also a time for the earth goddess and the triple goddess. It's the time of the crone. So the triple goddess, as you probably know, is maiden, mother and crone. But Samhain is the time of the crone, which is the time of the wise woman. So it's a time to honour the wise women in your community, but also the wise woman within yourself. Samhain is a time when nature is preparing for its winter sleep and animals are preparing to hibernate. And for us and our own practice, it's a time of rest. It's a time to recover. It's a time to recuperate and reflect. The second spiritual theme relates to the veil between worlds being at its thinnest. It's a powerful time for divination. It's a powerful time to reflect on our own relationship with death. It's a time to remember our loved ones in spirit. It's a time to honour our ancestors. And I personally feel it's also a time to honour the witches and also honour the druids of old who were the shamans of our lands. And also to honour anybody else that was persecuted during the witch trials. This is a time to remember them. So let's explore some practical ways to honour Samhain in our own spiritual practices. And I'd love to know what you think. I'd love to know your favourite ways of honouring the season, whether it's Halloween or Samhain that you observe personally. And put that in the comments below. I'm really looking forward to reading them. So the first thing I would suggest is to go for a walk in nature and really tune in to the autumn energy. Tune in to the spirit of the land and the spirit of the place. And if you feel guided to, bring home something from the woods. This is a little sycamore leaf. Oh, it's actually quite big. Look, bigger than my head. Bring something home to adorn your own personal altar. If you've got an altar at home, then you might want to refresh it for Samhain. The second thing, another thing that you could do is to explore divination at this time of year. No matter what kind of things, what kind of ways you prefer to practice, you may feel drawn to tarot cards, you may feel drawn to using angel cards or dowsing or runes or scrying or maybe automatic writing at this time of year. But the veil is thin between worlds, and so it is a perfect time to ask for guidance and ask for help. And if you are walking a shamanic path, it's a powerful time to journey and to get those questions answered as well. Thinking back to some of the traditional practices that we mentioned in chapter 1, you may also want to simply build a fire within your home, thinking back to those communal fires we mentioned in the first chapter. So tend a fire within your hearth or tend a fire in a chimenea in the garden. As we saw in the origins and the spiritual themes section, this is the perfect time to honour the dead. Samhain is a time to remember our loved ones in spirit. So look through old photographs, tell stories of their life, cook their favourite food. It's also a time to honour our ancestors, and I'd urge you to do that in whichever way feels right to you, whichever way feels culturally right to you to honour your own loved ones in spirit. A simple way to honour both our loved ones in spirit and our ancestors is an ancient Celt practice of simply setting the table and leaving a space for our loved ones in spirit at the dinner table as we're eating our dinner, as a way to invite them to join us. The ancient Celts also lit a candle and put a candle in the window to help lost souls to find their way into spirit, which is a really beautiful practice. Although, of course, if you've got net curtains or blinds, we don't want it to be that kind of fire festival. So be really safe, be really careful. But it's a beautiful way to honour the dead. Ultimately, Samhain is a powerful time. It's a time to turn our gaze inwards. It's a time of deep reflection, contemplation, and meditation. And it's a beautiful thing to incorporate into our own practice. If you'd like any help in your own spiritual journey, you may find these videos helpful. So from my heart to yours, Samhain blessings, sweet souls. I'll see you in the next video.